and they're also an Ace Hardware. I started with them in an 8,500 square foot store that they owned, and brought them into Ace Hardware. They existed prior, and then because of the community and all, we expanded it to 10,500 square feet, and then up from there. But they're just good personal entrepreneurs that are putting $3.6 million on the line, debt and equity, to invest in this one building and business in Harriman. So most of the stores, especially when they're out of the ground like this, with the costs, all the costs of construction involved, it's not uncommon for them to lose money for 3 years or so. So even with the growth we're anticipating, we expect that, as Gordon said, there's at least $113,000, $115,000 of hard losses that they have to fund, that they're going to lose money each year. And that's with us investing. Because of programs we now have in the corporation, we're investing in the store at the same time. We have hard money in the investment of every store.
Good. No, thank you. I think that extra explanation is really helpful for citizens.
Look, I brought a few of these. For those that are interested, this is about the corporation. So it gives you a flavor of who Ace Hardware Corporation is. It's a great little brochure because it tells a lot of a story in a few pages. And I'm going to leave some of my business cards, so if you have questions, you can contact me and or go through Gordon, either way.
So I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
So the incentive is for Ace or for the owner of the store?
No. Whatever's accomplished goes to the owner to help offset.
So you're asking for them?
Yes, I'm
here. Thank you, John.
I'm here representing them on behalf of them.
The next question is for Gordon. Maybe just clarify. So in the packet it says a 3-year rebate. It says 4, and I've heard 5. So
okay, I'm going to say I intended to be 4, and so your packet probably says 3 because I probably typed 3, but it meant to be 4.
Just want to clarify.
So 3 equals 4.
3 is
no
4.
math.
It's a maximum
Average 3 and 5.
Yeah.
So if year 2 is only generates 3,000, you get 3,000, and if they get 5 the other years, we'll be at 17 total.
Yeah. No year could exceed. No year could exceed, and no 4 years could exceed. So it has both restrictions. And they've been a great partner. They're going to pay all the impact fees. This is again, the city has adopted a much more robust architectural standard with the brick, 60%. They've done all that with the glass. So there was some additional things that they've complied to. So these are things that have added to the cost. Again, I think it's a great partner, great group to have in the city.
Just one more comment on that. The question came up. These stores don't just happen in a year or two. The shortest store I've ever done was about 6 months. The longest one's 8.5 years to get to an actual store on the ground. And we were involved in some aspect of trying to move it forward during that time. I'll submit to you that I've been down this path for 7 years on Harriman, and multiple prospects. Some were Ace retailers already, and some were not, trying to put together the economics. And a lot of times what we struggle with, as in the case of, say, Spanish Fork, if you ever get down there and see that one, it was impossible to do on a leased situation, which is kind of the situation we run into here. We couldn't make it work financially on a lease situation. By the time we got done paying a developer and the builder and everybody what they wanted, and then the increasing rents over time. So that, when we get to a new ground up like this, it eliminates all kinds of prospects on my part, because how many people can put $3.6 million on their balance sheet and get loans for it and be able to support a startup store, out of the ground. That's the challenge, and that's what took us longer, is, trying to get to the right place, being able to buy the land instead of lease it, which the developers initially wanted to just lease. And then secondly, build the building and find and be able to interest, an existing retailer in this case, to put up that kind of debt and money in order to do a store here.
Perfect, thank you very
Yes.
much.
So if the council's comfortable with this, then what we'll do is do a study and bring back something in January to approve with this outline.
Legal has to review.
Yeah, legal, do all the legal things first. And he has Christmas and New Year's to get the stuff done, so it's not a real problem.
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
So you're looking for nods?
Yes. 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Enough. All right,
Thank you.
Just one question. Did anybody not get a brochure that would like one or a card? Is there enough here?
we have an extra one here. We'd love to have
Okay.
one more.
What? One more?
We got it.
Oh,
You
sorry.
got it covered?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Any questions you may have, feel welcome to call me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please
Thank
pass on
you.
our appreciation to
You bet.
our future neighbors.
Listen,
Potentially.
we're happy to be here. Fortunately, in my life, I get to work from the Rocky Mountains all the way to Alaska. So I put a store in Barrow, Alaska last year, the tip of the North American continent. It was 44 below zero when I went there, dark to dark in 3.5 hours. And they are so pleased and happy to have a hardware store.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move back to 3.1. Are we ready for our youth council minute?
The display's not working. Oh, as a presentation mode, so it's actually gonna be a little funky here.
Right, that's okay. We're from the Harriman Youth Council. I'm Alexander, I'm the youth city manager.
I'm Abby, I'm the operations specialist. I'm Grace Watson, and I'm a PR specialist.
We're here to tell you about our youth council food drive. Just to give you a history, in the past we've done some dances and they've done okay, but what we want to do is branch out and include the whole community. It was just teens before, and we wanted to use the city resources that we have, which includes the ice ribbon that we have. If you have any questions during any of this, or if you have any comments, we'd love to hear it. And so what we're looking at is Monday, January 28th. Monday was one of the least busy times, and so we wanted to not detract from the main thing, and we're looking at the whole time. And then also for, this is also up to you, of how many cans would equal admission. So how it would work is, instead of paying that usual $6, you pay cans, or you could do, it's up to you if you want to do a portion of cans in cash, but that would just give back to the food bank.
So on the topic of, and we're trying to encompass the whole community, so we want to make this a very big event that is under Harriman City's name, but it's organized by us youth. So our tentative theme is Lights on Ice, so it's going to be very elegant, it's going to have lots of white lights, it's going to be very pretty. We want to stress that this is an event, we want to organize it with decorations like we said, and refreshments, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, and it's just not ice skating. So along with an event, obviously we have partnerships with businesses. So a few of the pictures up there describe the businesses that we are currently working with to organize refreshments and a potential raffle as part of our event.
So you've already met with them, and they're
Yes.
excited to be a part of it.
We're currently working with them to organize.
Good for you.
Thank you. So it's promoting a lot of local businesses.
All right, on the PR side of things, we're working with the city newspaper, the local newspaper like the South Valley Journal. We're working to make announcements in schools and put posters up in shops and city buildings like the rec center. we're trying to create as much awareness as possible for Harriman City and the Youth Council, because not a lot of youth in Harriman know that Youth Council exists, so getting Youth Council out there too is a great thing, and also promoting the use of the ice ribbon, as still most residents don't know about it. With cost to the city, so every night it's $50 to staff an hour, so $175 a night. Mondays, on average, last year, they generated $405, and Saturdays generated almost $2,000. So we chose a Monday night, so that way there's less revenue loss and more awareness to bring to the ice ribbon.
It's also family night, so
Yeah.
it's a good choice.
Yeah.
It would still be open for regular business, and so you're not going to be out $500. It's still going to be open, still welcoming anybody, but they will have the option that night of food or cash. And the benefits for the city and for everyone really, they're promoting these local businesses and helping them out, and also the ice ribbon. We really want to focus on that publicity and sharing that with everyone, you know, schools and community places, and so that we're able to, and we'll have the ice ribbon logo on there, and so people know that we have an ice ribbon, and it's also going to help our businesses, and improves public image. You know, it's kind of that Harriman City gives a thought that we support youth and support charity, so it looks good on you guys, and then it also creates awareness for us. And then for the Utah Food Bank, it's one of their driest times. They get cleared out for the holidays, and there's not a lot of food drives going on in January. January's a really slow time, and so people are not going to be, you know, overstimulated with a bunch of food drives. And then again, this is a fun event for families. We want this to be included. Focus on teens, but again, this is a family event. So if you have any questions or comments.
Well done. Excited about it.
Jeff?
Good job, guys. I think one of the questions they had for us was, like the 5 can, do you guys have any input on, is that okay with you guys, the 5 cans, and everybody equal, just an admission and rental?
That's good.
You've done all of your legwork. I'm very impressed.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm very impressed with the 3 of you. Good presentation, good homework. Very impressed with the council. I think everyone kind of feels that in the room too. Good job.
Great job.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, you're not gonna stay the rest of the night? You can take it. You don't have to stay. All right, we will move on to item 3.2, continued discussion on July 11th, 2018, and November 14th, 2018 regarding mayor's travel expenses. All right, so this is a discussion we have. I would like to provide the council with some information, so I have some stuff for all of you. Should there be more copies? We don't project it to. Okay. Here's
Do you want to go over it right
and then
now?
I would like to go over it. I actually have,
Does this change, Mayor?
yes.
As?
Yes, it has. So I also like to, I have some slides I'd like to show so that we can walk through this real quick. Okay. All right, so obviously I wasn't here at our last meeting, but obviously there was quite a bit of discussion. There's been quite a bit of information that's been put out there that I want to just clear some things up as far as time-wise, and then go over the actual transactions themselves. So I want to start off. It was mentioned back on June 26th that I had been sent an email. So I started turning in receipts back on June 26th. It was the beginning of the process. Later that day, I did receive an email from Alan stating that the receipts were insufficient or missing. And I was directed to work with our city accountant to provide additional information. So I went and I spoke with Shauna that day and tried to determine what was still needed. On the 27th of June, so the next day, all the additional receipts that had been requested by Shauna were provided to Alan. I did ask Alan to review the documentation and let me know if there was any additional information that was needed. July 10th, the city manager requested a meeting for 30 minutes prior to the city council meeting on July 11th. On July 11th, I met with the city manager and the finance director, and they stated verbally that there were some concerns, and they listed some of them. At that time, I immediately started providing some additional information, including the text message that you'll see here in a minute, validating the missing receipt that I filled out a form for. And then the council was informed in the public meeting, where I verbally requested copies of all documentation to be provided to the city council. And in an effort to show good faith in the city and the staff, I agreed to pay for things and then work for reimbursement for appropriate charges. On July 12th, in writing, I sent a request for details of the issue because I still had yet to receive any of the details. In July, sometime in July, I'm not exactly sure when, but sometime in July, Harriman City staff referred the issue to the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office for review for criminal charges. On July 25th, I made another written request to be provided with the documentation originally requested on the 11th, asking what transactions still had concerns. On July 31st, I made my third written request. At that point, I was demanding the information be provided to me at the end of the day. You have these emails in your packet so that you can verify that these were given to staff. On July 31st, after I sent that third email, I was contacted by the district attorney's office, and that was when I was informed that I was being investigated. On July 31st, after that, I spoke with the city manager and asked again to have the information provided to me, because I still at that point did not have the documentation. Later that day, I was provided with a packet. The council was provided with that same information at that time. In August, at that point, I obtained legal counsel, and I informed the city manager that per legal counsel's direction, I wouldn't be participating in any discussions until after the DA's office had completed their investigation. On August 6th, I received an email, and so did the council, that stated that, from staff that stated every transaction was handled completely according to our policy except for a $2 and $12 for parking reimbursement. This was an email
that.
It's in your packet, you're welcome to look at it. This was in response to the legislative travel account for 2018. And I've provided you with a copy of that. On November 14th, the council discussed concerns. I was not present. November 15th, the city was provided notice from the district attorney's office indicating that no charges would be filed. The city manager informed me on the 27th of November that they had received that response from the district attorney's office and requested approval to have that information released to the council. That was the first I had been informed of that. And on November 27th, we were provided with a copy of that report. That same night after that report was provided, Councilman Henderson did email me requesting me to provide repayment of $946.31 by December 12th. Up to this point, I want to make it clear that I have not received any itemized documentation as to exactly what that $946.31 is for. I'll throw it. Oh, boy, it's okay. Somebody really wants to talk to Shay.
I just turned the volume off on my computer.
Okay, on November 30th, I provided a packet with receipts for all transactions from May of 2018 to the city manager. Attached to the packet was a letter that indicated that the refunds had been issued or requested for several charges in question. At the same time, I notified that the city that the airline had refunded some of the costs. And that those funds were sitting in an attorney's escrow account, and asked for written documentation for a request to have that paid to the city. Once again, at that time, I again requested details on which transactions specifically were in question. And on December 5th, I received an email from the city manager responding in writing, stating that I should address all these concerns with the city council. This is our first scheduled city council meeting since the district attorney's office has completed their investigation. So this was just that original email that was sent. You have this in your packet. I just want to make sure that we're all working off the same documentation, so I've included it in the presentation as well. And you have, I believe, all of these documents in your packet as well. This is the city credit card statement, so we're going to be working off of this document directly. This was the travel log that I submitted to the city originally back in June. There's a couple things I want to point out about this. After I received that email on June 26th, this is just making this larger, I went and spoke with Shauna and our finance partner for further instruction on what was missing, what was needed, because it wasn't very specific as exactly what was and wasn't appropriate in that original email that I provided to you. At that time, Shauna informed me that any of these transactions with the red check marks, at that time I no longer needed to provide a receipt for whatever reason, whether it had been provided by, it had already been acquired, or for some other reason was not needed. That's what I was told by our city accountant. Okay. So these are the red checks that I'm referring to. The blue marks are marks that I've made on that paperwork before I turned it in a second time. This is just the documentation provided on July 31st of what some of the issues are, the issues that staff was indicating. Those issues, so that's the information that I've been working with. So let's go through these receipts. The first transaction is for $25 to Delta. The issue is that no receipt was provided. No receipt was originally provided, as I was told on June 26th that one was not needed. It also should be noted that this is a receipt was attached to City Manager Wood's Delta account, to which I don't have access to. So this was a baggage for Brentwood. Second transaction is a baggage fee for myself. Once again, the receipt was not provided because, I was told by Shauna that it wasn't needed.
But to be clear, our policy states that receipts are required for every purchase, just to be clear.
We'll talk about policy.
Notice on
I'm
this
sorry,
one-
I haven't.
Notice this guy might.
Excuse me.
We'll let you tear into it.
Excuse me.
Fair enough, fair enough. Go ahead, sorry to interrupt.
Okay. All right. Transaction number 3. This was a transaction for lunch at the Capitol. I originally provided a receipt in June. However, there was no detail I was indicated by staff that there wasn't sufficient detail. So since then, I've provided the missing receipt form as requested, indicating that I had a bagel for lunch. Right, this is the next transaction. Once again, this was for a meal. Staff indicated that I did submit it in June. However, staff indicated that there was no detail. There is the detailed receipt that I have now provided. Just notice that this is the same receipt number.
When was that provided?
This was provided back in the second receipt. I'm not 100% sure. The first receipt was provided in June. The second receipt, I'm not 100% sure. That may have been recent. Okay, there's another receipt for Burger King. Once again, for a meal. Receipt was provided in June. Staff indicated that there was no issue identified by staff. So this is another one of the ones that there's been some discussion regarding. The amount was for $50 to the Grand Hyatt. This was the one that originally I had provided a missing receipt for because I did not have a receipt for it. Let me just pull out some of the information here so that you can see it in a little bit better detail. This receipt was submitted and approved by City Manager Wood on June 27th of 2018. I did make a typo on this one. I did incorrectly type May 11th instead of May 10th. That was simply a typo. I do want to note that this was the date of checkout. This was not the date of the actual meal, as this was on the room, charge for the room. The form did indicate that I was having breakfast with the Assistant City Manager, Hayes. And staff has now stated that the Assistant City Manager cannot remember having breakfast on that trip. So I've provided, on the morning of the 8th, Assistant City Manager Haight texted all individuals that were on the trip and indicated he was having breakfast, to which I replied that I was on my way as well. As you can see, the date is May 8th, and there's the specific text communication back and forth indicating that I had breakfast with Assistant City Manager Haight.
So just to comment on that one, I had seen this in your
I'd be happy to
packet.
take some comments once I've gone through all of these. Thank you.
Okay, we'll indulge it.
All right, on this receipt, I was able to obtain this receipt from the Grand Hyatt. The receipt was not originally provided as it was part of the room receipt, which had already been received by staff when staff paid for the room. So this is the room receipt, which staff actually paid for. So that's where that's why I didn't originally have that receipt. Just pull out this, make it easier to see. This is the specific transaction in question. As you can see, the date of that transaction is the 8th of May. And that the receipt clearly says that it is for breakfast food at the Cabinet. The Cabinet is the name of the restaurant at the hotel. Okay, next transaction is an Uber transport. The concern given by staff, it was provided in June. This was for travel from the Salt Lake City Airport returning from DC on behalf of the city. The original issue that was indicated was that I had traveled somewhere other than City Hall. I had traveled to a UFA training that was provided to newly elected officials. Councilwoman Warren was also in attendance at that training. And she was actually gracious enough to provide me transport home from that training back to City Hall to get my car after I had after that training was over.
You did take Uber too?
The next transaction is for $25 for a baggage fee. That receipt was provided in June, and staff indicated there were no concerns with that transaction. Next transaction is the hotel stay in Denver. The issue on this one was that it exceeded the government's GSA per diem rate. So that we're all working on the same page. The government per diem rate for May of 2008 in Denver was $180 per night. One of the things that should be specifically noted is that does exclude tax. That is the room rate, not the rate after tax. The room rate was $299. The difference of that was $119 for that night. I did reach out to the hotel, and they stated by phone that had I asked for the per diem rate, they would have honored it at the time. Unfortunately, I was not aware that that was something I needed to do, and so I did not ask for it at that time. However, I have since mailed a written request to the hotel to ask that they honor that rate as they've stated that they would have had I asked for it at the time, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. Next transaction is the early return flight home. So this is the Uber from the hotel to the airport. The receipt was provided in June, and this was so that I could return to Harriman to vote to have the vote to leave Unified Police Department. Next transaction is from the airport to Harriman City Hall, where we had that vote that night. Once again, the receipt for this was provided in June. Next transaction is the Delta airline flight for the return trip from Washington D.C. to Harriman City for that vote. A receipt was I want to call out this receipt was provided to staff in June. It's been indicated that I did not provide a receipt to staff. This receipt was provided back in June. The flight was from D.C. to Salt Lake City to vote to leave Unified Police Department. On August 7th, I did reach out to Delta, and a Delta representative stated via phone that it had been a mistake on the part of Delta booking agents to charge me for a new flight instead of simply changing the return leg. As such, Delta issued a refund for the unused portion of the original flight. That amount is about $455.
When was that correspondence with Delta?
August 7th. The date of the actual, I have the receipt, I'd be happy to provide it at a later time for when that was provided.
And then when did they issue the refund to you?
A couple of days later. I think it was the 14th, but I'm not gonna, don't hold me to that because it was sometime a couple of days later.
And the refund was
And the amount of?
Roughly $455. That was the unused portion of the return of the original flight. Upon receipt, those funds were actually placed into an attorney's escrow account pending review by the district attorney's office. So upon receipt, I immediately placed those into an escrow account with my attorney until that particular issue could be resolved. Upon completion of the DA's review, a request was provided to staff, which you have in your packet, for a written request so that I can pay those out to the city. The written request is needed so that I can ensure proper documentation when working with an attorney's escrow account. The city staff directed me back to the city council in this particular case. Next transaction, these are transactions from Las Vegas, and we, all of us except for Councilwoman Martin, attended the ICSC conference. This first one for an Uber to dinner, receipt was provided in June, no issue was identified by staff. The next is the return from the same meal. Once again, the receipt was provided in June. No issue was identified by staff. The next transaction is a receipt for the taxi from the airport to the hotel in Las Vegas. Once again, the receipt was provided in June. No issue was identified by staff. Next was for a meal in Las Vegas for one of the nights. Once again, a receipt was provided in June. No issue was identified by staff. This is a $20 charge to the Courtyard. This was for breakfast before the conference on one of the mornings. A receipt was submitted in June, however, staff indicated that there was not sufficient detail. So since then, I have submitted a missing receipt form that indicated that I had an omelet for breakfast and tipped. Next transaction is, once again, for a meal. The receipt was provided in June. No issue was identified by staff. Okay, the next two transactions, there are actually two transactions here because the issue that was identified was because of the difference between the two transactions. These are for the rooms in Las Vegas for myself and for Councilman Henderson. Councilman Henderson's room was placed on my credit card, so that's it was placed on my credit card, and so that's where this has been identified as. The receipt was provided in June for my room. However, the receipt was not provided for Councilman Henderson's room since the receipts are generally provided directly to the room. And when I talked to Shauna on the 26th, she indicated that it was not needed at that time. So my understanding that was because she already had it. This is just a blow up of the same information. The staff indicated that the price difference was due to the mayor being on the top floor. I want to call out here specifically that both of the rooms were for the exact same type on the exact same floor. So we were both on the third floor with the same room type. I spoke to the hotel. The representative stated that the cost difference was actually due to fluctuation in room costs based on time of booking. And as such, they immediately refunded the difference. So they have refunded the $20.40 back to the city credit card.
When did you speak with them?
That was refunded, the dates on that, I'm sorry, it was refunded recently.
November 30th.
This is the last transaction. It was Best Buy. Staff indicated some concerns on July 11th, but on July 31st, they indicated in the report that was provided that an acceptable receipt was provided with the original report. I don't believe the council discussed this item at the November 14th meeting as well. So those are all the transactions. So I wanted to start with that base of information, and then listen to what the council would like to discuss.
I'll start with a couple of what I think are absolutely key issues here. One obviously was documentation, and we see that some additional documentation has been provided. However, I am aware that some of that documentation was provided on November 30th.
Yes.
So first off, that far exceeds the current city policy of the timing of when that documentation should be provided. The way that the city purchasing works, we don't have 6 months to decide whether or not they're valid charges or not. And the city obviously has reconciled these some time ago. So obviously the fact that you waited 6 months to provide some of this documentation, honestly is of great concern to me because again, we're talking about policy, we're talking about transparency, we're talking about taxpayer dollars, and this honestly could have been resolved very easily and very quickly right up front when we had the initial discussion about it. And so I guess I'm really questioning of why it took so long for us to receive some of this information. Obviously, there was a number of missing receipt forms used as the documentation in there. Having been familiar with these types of purchasing policies in the past, a missing receipt form, while it's there as a last resort, I think it's very disingenuous for us to think that turning in a number of missing receipt forms to cover those it somehow meets the intent of the policy. Again, the intent of the policy is to have those detailed itemized receipts that show obviously all of the food items that were purchased, all of the associated transactions for airlines or for hotels. that's what provides the protection to the city, especially when we go through our audits and we talk about transparency with our residents. So I have some great concern over the timing of us receiving a lot of this documentation. Again, the time to turn all of this in adequately and completely was with that purchase card at the end of June. Plain and simple. 6 months later, in my mind, is completely unacceptable, and it shouldn't be acceptable by anyone in this room, and it shouldn't be acceptable by any of our residents to think that we have policies in place that we have all agreed to adhere to, and yet somebody chooses not to, or chooses to do it at their own pace and at their own timeline because they don't agree with the way that this may have been approached or the way that this may have been discussed. And I get that this is not comfortable for any of us. None of us, I believe, want to be sitting here having this conversation right now. This is completely distracted from the city business. It's completely distracted from what we've been elected to do, and yet we have spent an exorbitant amount of time in the past 6 months trying to resolve this issue. And again, 6 months later, we get a bound book, be it my understanding is printed on city paper and bound with city supplies.
Why would that be inappropriate if I'm providing it to city staff?
Because this is your responsibility, not the city's responsibility, Mayor. This just goes to speak to,
Okay.
this goes to speak to what I believe is some of the core issues here, and the fact that again, this is your issue to deal with. The fact that you come in and you spend, how many of these binders did you make today, Mayor?
I made 10 copies.
10 binders. One, I don't need it bound. All of these copies of city supplies, again, you think, my frustration is, and you can tell that I'm frustrated because 6 months we've been dealing with this, and this could have been resolved so easily, Mayor, if you'd have done what you said you were gonna do on July 11th.
I appreciate that feedback.
Pay the bill, change the behavior, and we're done. And honestly, we would have all moved on and not be sitting here today. But what it states is that in my opinion, there's a disregard from you of what city process is, of the respect of staff, the respect of this body, the respect of the residents, that you believe it's okay. And again, I believe this is a small thing, but again, I think this speaks to the whole issue. You think it's okay to come in here without, did you ask anybody if you could use these supplies today?
No, I did not.
Okay. Why in your mind is it okay to come in and use all of the city supplies to try and rectify a problem that only exists because you didn't follow policy? Why should the city incur any additional costs associated with this issue? So let's get back to some of the other issues. Sorry, Jared, I'll give you a chance here. Let's get back to some of the other issues
Do you
that
want him to respond to that?
No, that's all right. Let's get through the issues.
No,
Let's
because
talk about
he didn't want anyone to respond during his time, so I'm gonna take my time.
Please.
Let's get back to some of the issues that were not brought up in regards to some of the charges. So the Denver Hotel, yes, we did talk about that it was $119 over the GSA rate. Let's talk about why you were in Denver anyways. Fact of the matter is that your flight was overbooked.
It was canceled.
It was overbooked.
The email you have from staff says it was canceled.
It was overbooked.
It was not overbooked. It was canceled.
Brett, would you like to?
Well, it was all there, it was overbooked, and they said we have to show a future flight.
Okay.
Regardless, the plane wasn't going anywhere. I mean, we could quibble about the reason, but we were all grounded for whatever reason.
For whatever
the
reason.
airline chose.
But at the time, you took it upon yourself to go and find an alternate route home because you had this UFA training the next day, correct? You felt like it was important to be home for something that was optional. It was non-essential to your role as the mayor or the city business in general.
Wait,
But-
Nicole, were you
Yeah,
supposed to
so,
be to that
yes,
same
I was
thing?
also supposed to be to that.
And you
Sorry,
did.
and I'll let you talk to
Sorry,
that
you
when
were
we
on
get
the
to there.
I
Same
just
flight
wanted to
from.
put that in there.
Absolutely. Nicole, Brett, Tammy, Gordon were all there. The reason that we ended up with a $119 charge is because you felt that it was so important for you to get out of there that you made alternate arrangements, left the rest of the group to get home earlier because your flight was delayed, when in reality, you ended up home about 30 minutes ahead of everybody else. 30 minutes. at the cost of an additional $119 plus tax. This, in my opinion, is not being anyone that's using sound judgment and being fiscally responsible with our taxpayer dollars. You made a decision to leave the group, to leave the rest. Nicole, did you have a reason to be home?
Yes, I had to take an additional day off of work.
Tammy, did you have a reason to be home? Brett, did you have a reason to be home?
Actually, I was okay with staying, and I had that made a statement to the mayor at the time when he pulled me over the counter, said that he got me on that flight with him. I says, I cannot, that's not good leadership. Leadership doesn't leave his people behind. Make sure we have people that have to be on that flight. And I had a couple of people have a little meltdown because they were postponed. I redirected the counter management, and he was kind of perplexed because it was the Delta counter, and Mayor ended up getting a United flight. I don't know how that happened, but we were all frustrated with him.
Absolutely.
I very specifically said, this is poor leadership. Leaders put these people first, not second.
So,
and I was very mad he booked me without my permission.
Absolutely. So my
I
point
stay
here
behind.
is this is much more, in my opinion, than just the expenditure of additional tax dollars. It goes to speak to the whole mindset and leadership qualities, that it was more important for you to leave the group to be home for an elective, optional thing, rather than keeping the group together, and it cost us an additional $119 for 30 minutes of time. Next, let's talk about this mosquito abatement trip. Again, we talked about the airline ticket, but let's talk about the reasons for the airline ticket. You kept saying that it was because of a city vote that was going to take place. Did you not indicate to all of the council and make arrangements prior to going on this trip to call in for that meeting?
You'd like me to respond to this point?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So,
I would like a yes or no answer. Did you indicate to the council and make arrangements with Jackie to call in and participate electronically for that meeting?
yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. So, your decision to, again, you were there on a mosquito
Let me
abatement
correct that.
trip.
I did that with Jackie, I did not do that to the council. I was
No,
on-
that is an.
That's not-
Incorrect.
that's not-
You indicated it, every
Hold on.
single one of us.
No, hold on, because I was already going to be mayor pro tem. I already knew it, I was planning on it, there was no
Then I-
expectation
Then I'm
that you would be
mistaken, I
there.
apologize.
No, that's,
Then-
you
then I
absolutely were not
apologize.
going
In
to.
In fact,
fact,
you had stated in several meetings ahead of time that you're going to DC. In fact, in a meeting prior, you asked our permission if we would pay for a hotel for you and your wife to just stay in
Oh, I
DC.
never said for my wife.
In between, yes, you did. In the work meeting, you did. In between the two, and we told you unequivocally no, and you stated several times, well, I won't be there that meeting, and we can make other arrangements.
Absolutely. So, the issue is that you were there on a mosquito abatement trip, correct?
Correct.
City business?
That part of the trip, no. The trip itself was not city business.
So why would it be okay to book a return ticket on the city's credit card on a trip that you just admitted was not city business?
Yes, it was not city business.
Why would it be okay to expend city dollars on a trip that was not city business? The issue here is again, it goes to behavior. It goes to actions that this council has continually had to deal with. And it's been quite frustrating. So we're talking about $619 that you felt was appropriate to make a decision on your own without communicating to any of us or city staff, to be here for a meeting that you had already made arrangements to participate electronically. This was a decision that you made on your own and felt that it was appropriate to go slap down $690 on the city's credit card for you to be here for no other reason for you to be here. You were going to be able to participate electronically, you had made those arrangements, you were going to be able to participate in all of the discussion and the vote. But for some reason, you felt it was important enough and that you had the right to be able to spend city money, taxpayer money, for you to come home early, which you walked in the middle of the meeting and acted like that it was just no big deal when all of us expected you to be participating for the entirety of the meeting electronically. That was what you'd communicated, and that's what you had made arrangements for. My frustration is that you believe that just because we have some documentation for receipts up here, that the issue then goes away. But the issue is much deeper than just a disregard for city policy and a disregard for our taxpayer dollars and an attitude that as the mayor, that you can make those decisions on your own without consulting staff at the very least who has to control our city's budget. These are not actions in my mind that are appropriate for the mayor of the city. And I'm frustrated again that we are sitting here today, 6 months after the fact, continuing to discuss this issue, which could, again, by your own admission and by your own words that you would repay it and take care of it. If there would have been things to work out, if we would have determined after some of these refunds got made that there was money owed back to you, I guarantee our finance department would have taken care of that. We could have worked out those things, but instead, you have refused to engage, you've refused to communicate, you've refused to provide any of this documentation. Again, we walk in tonight and are handed this. You've refused to do any of this for 6 months. And unfortunately, this isn't the first in terms of this body having to deal with your behavior and some of your decisions and some of your actions. And quite frankly, Mayor, I'm tired of it. It is completely distracted us from what every one of us ran to be here for. To focus on the city business, to focus on making our city greater, to plan for our future, to plan for our families. And yet here we are for the third meeting, plus all of the other time that staff and ourselves have spent in trying to resolve this issue and dealing with this issue and dealing with concerned and angry residents and everything that goes along with it. Here we are again dealing with it instead of this full agenda, this huge agenda that we have of pertinent city business. I don't want you to think that just because you provide some documentation that really makes this issue just disappear and go away. And I think it's disingenuous that you should think that this body or the residents as a whole would accept that. We deserve better than that, Mayor.
I think it's insulting that you think this makes this go away.
Before you start, do you want me to respond to anything you said, or do you all want to go through first and talk about it?
I don't think there's any response. I think we totally agree with everything that Councilman Smith has said. And for the work meeting, I think all that needs to be said is that all this information has been provided to the accounting department, and it's up to them to give us their report, which they have on what is acceptable and what is not. And this doesn't absolve you of any of the violations of policy. None. Not a single one. I don't know how in your mind you think this makes everything okay. You still have violated the policy, whether you provided actual receipts 6 months later, or I forgot a receipt form that would result in disciplinary action leading up to termination with employees, right? If you actually read the policy, as you should have, and understood these things, you should have understood that there's a government standard rate for rooms. Ignorance is not an excuse. You signed the policy and said, I understand. This was not your first trip. You demonstrated the ability to document things properly prior to these things. There's no excuses whatsoever. The city manager was good enough to provide us with a copy of all of this, except for the couple first little emails here. They've been able to go through it. This absolves you of nothing. I don't know how in the world you think this makes it go away. You still have violated the policy in all the ways that will be described. But I think that in the interest of our residents, that's what we're going to have to take the bulk of our general meeting to go through. I know that staff has spent a lot of time detailing everything from A to Z, timeline, etc., to spell out for our residents exactly what the issues are here. That we have a policy, and the policy was violated in all of these different ways. And this is what has transpired since then, and this is why we're at the point we are now, where we're all spending an insane amount of time and resources dealing with something that could have been dealt with providing some paper 6 months ago. So I think in the interest of time, we should move through the rest of the work agenda that we can and address the rest of this in the general session.
Yes, please, let's do that. Alright, so
only thing I would add is just to echo that this is, it shows a complete lack of respect to your fellow people on the council and staff.
I appreciate that feedback, and before we move on, you made a comment that I believe that this absolves me of all violation of policy. I don't believe I've said that at all.
I believe you've told a number of people that I'll be fine, this will go away.
I have never said that this would go away. I will freely admit that I did not fill out the paperwork correctly the first time. And that is something I do take responsibility for. While the specific policies that you were discussing, you know, I think there's some, let's just say, I'll just say for now, because it looks like you guys want to have this discussion in the general session, so I respect that. I think I've already shown that I've tried to work through this. I was actively working towards it, and then I was under criminal investigation. And I believe it's disingenuous to say that because I didn't provide any further documentation at the time while I was under criminal investigation, that I wasn't.
I think that is absolutely ridiculous.
You can feel that that's ridiculous.
And disgusting. I'm so insulted by you even saying that.
Why?
You can't, because the DA's office, because our chief of police and our attorney, out of a matter of procedure, referred it to the DA's office for them to review if there is any criminal offense to look at. That somehow you don't have to provide a receipt for charges you incurred? That's what you just said.
I said I didn't provide it. I didn't provide it at the time. I was waiting until the investigation was resolved, and then 2 days after it was resolved,
you have to wait 6 months to provide a receipt for a charge that you made.
Why?
I've already stated because I was under investigation.
That's ridiculous.
That has nothing to do with city.
Has nothing to do with
Okay,
it.
well let's
Has
talk.
nothing to do with the city.
Okay, so what about the fact that I was requesting the documentation for weeks and was not being provided by staff?
Walk your bones in here and go get it.
Again, this is
Multiple times.
This is not staff's issue. This is your charge card.
Appreciate that feedback.
Your receipts.
I appreciate that.
You say you want to take responsibility. We want to see you take it.
Well, I'm still waiting to hear what the council actually said, because I don't know.
Let's move on, and you'll get that in the general meeting.
What exactly that the council is specifically saying that I need to pay back. I have yet to get anything.
We have given you the same items 3 different times
Can
already.
you show me when you provided me the details of what those items were?
July 11th.
July 11th.
We
Alan
reviewed all
detailed
on
them.
that night, and Alan
Okay,
detailed
so the
them.
numbers have been different every time I've gotten something from these meetings. So
What has
sometimes
it
it's
been?
let's see, sometimes it's 954, sometimes it's 946.
And that was clarified for you last week. Jared clarified that in an email for you because there was a question on that.
This has been a moving target. I've been getting receipts, I've been accepting some, and not others.
Okay, so what I'm asking now is
We gave you that on November 27th.
but what are those things for? I still don't know what those things are actually for.
And for you to say that you don't know what those are, again, is completely
It says,
insulting.
speaks volumes.
I'm
Very
sorry you feel that way, and I
insulting,
appreciate
very
that feedback, so.
Can I mention one thing? We talked about the August 6th email that said that everything was okay except for $2. That was not a response to his charges. That was a response to him requesting proof of a statement Tammy and I said during the meeting on July 11th that the account was overbalanced before he made the charges. So I reviewed, according to his request, that entire account for the whole year. Everything prior to his, except $2, had proper receipt, which was an answer to his question.
So this email was not in reference to his specific
No, it
bills.
was
So it's
it
been
was a
presented
response
it's been presented
to him
tonight.
asking the total of
Okay.
the account.
So
Thank you for that clarification,
Let's read
Alan.
this email since we're talking about it. Let's read the entire email.
You were digging your
There
hole.
was an attachment to it too,
Yes,
showing the account.
Which is-
save this for the work.
which is included as well.
Let's do that, let's move on and save it for the regular meeting. Alan, are you fine with that?
I'm sorry.
Alright,
What, did you have something to add? Nope.
let's just have this so that we have the full context of the discussion.
All right, so we will move on to item 3.3.
I need the plug. This is you. Travis? Would you like? Isn't that you?
No, that's you.
Oh, budget amendment. Okay. I forgot to bring it in with me, but we have two items. We've been given corridor preservation money for 2 right-of-ways. The budget amendment in the meeting will be to approve the budget to receive that money and to pay for the land that it's designated to buy.
And good work on securing the funds. Well done.
Good news.
Item 3.4, discussion pertaining to the elected officials' compensations and benefits.
Alright, so again, human resources, we look at compensation, we talked about this at the last city council meeting as well, but every year, we do look at compensation. We look at compensation across the board, we pull salary survey data, and our strategy as a city is to be in the middle or to be in the median. We don't want to be over the market, we don't want to be under the market. We think to keep good employees and to stay within our market, we want to be at the middle. So that's usually where our numbers come from, and that's usually where we kind of start from. So next slide, Alan. I only have 2. Is where the market is saying, comparable cities in our situation, put our city council and also put our mayor. So we can see that these numbers, the average mayor's pay that we talked about in the last city council, and the grouping that we wanted to look at was $20,500 per year. And our average city council pay was $14,500 per year. We did request some of the cities that we looked at. I do specifically have those cities' numbers, but I don't necessarily love to broadcast those individually. But I can get those for you on paper right after.
But these are the comparable cities.
Yes, these are the comparable
These
cities.
are our group that we like going with our speed and meetings you have to attend and all those things that we make consideration.
Yep, as well. And city benefits, all these cities actually on this list, except for Eagle Mountain, actually provide city benefits to their mayor and city council, individually and as a family. So I felt those were good comparable cities. There's a lot of growth. There's similar structures as far as how much time or the part-time, full-time they give to their city council and to their mayor. I felt like they were good comparisons across the board, and hence the numbers came out as kind of the average. And I agreed with your recommendation to look at these groupings for our compensation package. So this is any additional discussion that you would like to have on these numbers as it goes into the general meeting. And
you'll, as you're doing this, show where we are. I'm sure you'll have an expanded, so it shows where we are as it relates. Not specifically, but as it relates.
So the ordinance is blanks.
Correct. Yep, it will need to be filled in by city council with approval as needed.
Any other questions for Travis? Okay, then we will move on to.
Thank you, Travis. This will be in the general meeting as well. We have given proper notice to the public about compensation benefit package for the council.
Item 3.6, Harriman Hills Trail update.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about all kinds of good stuff here. All right, trail updates. So tonight, I'm glad that we were able to get to this before the general session, because in your consent agenda, you do have the interlocal with Salt Lake County Parks and Recreation. They have agreed to fund $50,000 for a portion of the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, which we've talked about in several previous meetings. So are there any questions I can answer before the consent agenda tonight on this topic? It's for that.
Nice to see work being done on this, though.
Yeah, it's for the purple dotted section. We'll get the section from Diamondback over to White Hollow done for sure, and then any additional funding that's left will continue the trail as far as we can go.
So there'll be some connectivity right there that we just keep trying.
Yeah, we'll just keep plugging away as we get funding or money becomes available.
Good job.
I think
Okay.
it's awesome. It's amazing the feedback that you get from the residents as more of that opens up and that connectivity starts to take shape. I mean, we've seen obviously the excitement over some of the ones this summer, and I just think it's phenomenal. It's amazing to really think back of how long this process has been in place to try and acquire land or, or right of way, whatever the case may be, to be able to open this area up, and it's happening. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible.
So it's a good segue, because yesterday I had the opportunity to meet with Salt Lake County Parks and Recreation, and we talked about that section of VST and our joint desire to continue that to Yellow Fork. So we'll work on that as we work together on a lot of these projects, and you'll hear some exciting information here in a minute about some additional funding that we just received from them. I also met with them yesterday on UTV OHV. Our hope was that we would be able to access some of the Salt Lake County property in the southwest corner in the Rose Canyon area. According to them, it's not feasible, and they've gone through a study a few years ago. A lot of that property has conservation easements on it that requires it to remain non-motorized. So we're working through some other opportunities. So we'll keep you updated on that as we go forward.
That was the county, correct?
Mm-hmm. That was Salt Lake County.
But they seem to be in the same space where they would like to find some areas to open up to.
They said they looked at it a few years ago and found that it was not a feasible situation for them. So it doesn't sound like it's something that they're looking to do in the future. That could change with
specific area though.
Anywhere in the county.
But we as a city are trying hard to locate, not just so residents understand it, just because the county doesn't maybe potentially want to move forward, we're trying hard to find good spaces for this.
I had an email exchange with one of the residents that's interested earlier today, and we'll get together next week and see what we can. So,
Well, this goes to prove, again, talking about the timing that it's taken to get some of these, non-motorized trails in place, that this stuff does take time, but it is something we're continually trying to work on, because we want to be able to provide those opportunities for whatever avenue you choose to enjoy the outdoors. So
So we'll keep working on that. We got great news today that a grant that we had applied for, the Transportation Choice Fourth Quarter Fund, our projects were funded. We were awarded $415,000 in matching funds to finish Midas Creek and Rose Creek sections. And so we're really excited about that. Heidi and Jonathan Bowers and Eric Blackett were amazing in helping get this grant put together and pushed through, because we had a very short time period to do it. So it was really a great effort, and we're excited. Now, we already had some funding in place for these trails. This just expands the scope of them, so we're able to go all the way to 60th West for Midas Creek. I'll show you that map. That's right here. So that shows you the sections that we'll be completing with this grant match, as well as some bridges. So we're really excited about moving forward with this and connecting Copper Creek with the other side of the Mountain View corridor. That'll be great. Nice asphalt trail, so we're really excited about that. And Rose Creek, same thing. We do have some property that we still need to negotiate on, but otherwise we will work on connecting from the Cove all the way down to Butterfield Park. So we have an existing trail just west of Butterfield Park that dead ends. So we're looking at connecting that all the way through with asphalt. So that'll be another great opportunity for people. That was exciting news today. I'm going the wrong way, sorry. All right, Juniper Canyon. This, we made it Christmas color just for you. This, I just wanted to get this on your radar. We are working with G Brown Design, I have mentioned that before, and doing a conceptual design on this entire area. This is, I don't know how the pointer thing works. The Mulcock Trailhead is in the red there, and the green is the canyon area. You see Mountain View and Juniper Crest Road. This is the area that we're looking at for that recreation area. And we're also looking at how that area ties into the trails above, so into Eric's Trail. This is the current trail system that exists already. Some of it will be moved around depending on what amenities we end up placing in this area, but it will all connect up to the current trail system.
Sorry, I can't see, what's the road access to the trailhead?
It's Juniper Trail Drive goes to...
Okay, right there.
Sure, Blake, you can be the driver.
Juniper goes to there.
Yep. It's a direct route straight out of Juniper Crest.
Yeah, go down a mountain corridor to the east.
questions on that? As we move forward, we'll keep you updated, and as G Brown completes their design, and it will be a very public process as we get into the details of it, so. All right, next, Hardlick Downhill Bowl. This ended up in your packet. It probably shouldn't have, but I wanted to talk about it anyway since it was there.
I'm so excited you named something.
I know, I did it just for you, Brett.
We do hard lick spring. Trail.
So, we have a new Granicus software, and I accidentally uploaded this map to it, but now it's out there, so now you see it.
Yeah,
So we might as well talk about it.
Hard licks. So they call this spring, the sheep in the old days had to lick the rock to get water, so they call it hard lick springs.
So this is the Downhill Hardlick Bowl. This is very conceptual plan at this point, so I don't want anybody to get too excited about it yet. A lot of this is downhill, gnarly mountain biking. And you will probably wonder, why would we want to do that? Well, because people are crazy and they like to do that. So,
They've been pretty explicit, they wanna do this.
yes, the more dangerous, the better. So, just to give you an idea, it's tucked way back along the Camp Williams border. We may have to shift a few things here and there, but again, it's very conceptual and something that we're looking at doing in the next couple of years. We do have some mountain biking communities that are interested in volunteering, raising money, and helping to put this in. So the Trails Committee is actively working with a lot of them.
Is this out, on the other side of the sightline from the city? So is this behind the mountain?
Sorta in that one area. In some areas it is. You can see it from other areas. Okay, that's it on that one. That's it on that item. Any questions?
Why don't you go ahead with the next one?
All right, perfect. All right, this is the fun stuff. You all were Jackie sent out an email with several examples of other city ordinances. You can tell from looking at those that some cities are very vague in their rules and regulations for their parks, and some are very detailed. And we are somewhere in between. And for the last couple of years since I started working here, I've always found our park ordinance a little bit confusing and have wanted to update it, and so now here we go. We're gonna work on that over the next several months. Some of the information that I would like to obtain from you as we move forward are, first, thoughts on recognizing partner organizations as sponsored entities of the city. And by partner organizations, I'm mainly speaking as far as I'm concerned about leagues, our Harriman baseball, Harriman football, those types of leagues and entities. We have a sister city that does that, and they are identified by ordinance as qualified sponsored organizations. Operation times and dates are a big deal because this is what it looks like right now, and it's awful. So I would like to see some consistency. Obviously, there's going to be some areas that need to have specialized hours. Why are you looking at me like that? It's very confusing. It's a lot of information.
I like it. It needs work.
It needs work, John said, and I said that too. Some of our specialized parks, for example, Butterfield and Black Ridge are both locked areas, which I'm not a fan of locking parks. But I get it. I've seen the argument both ways. We've had several requests to open Black Ridge earlier and close it later, especially in the summer for trail users because they get locked in there. Because we do lock it up at 9 o'clock in the evening, so that's fairly early in the summer. So some of those things we need to have those discussions and see what you're feeling there. Beer gardens and rentals with alcohol. I briefly read through the new ordinance today, and that's a discussion that we need to have. We have had a local pub, About Time, contact us about providing beer gardens at events like Enduro Challenge and the Rodeo, which are a great stream of revenue, but they also come with some contention. So you have to weigh your pros and cons there, I guess, but something that I would like to know if you're open to that or not, and then whether we do want to have a specific section regarding trails and trail use. So, any conversation there? Any feedback on any of is there one group of ordinances that you saw that made more sense than others, or should I just throw it all together and bring it back to you?
I think
Yes.
Okay.
I think in regards to some of the operation times, I think it's worth the discussion to have on some of those. I get it in the summer hours too.
Yeah.
And with regards to the beer gardens, you know, and those, I think it's worth the discussion because I think we've all been to those events and realized that stuff is there anyways. I think if we provide that avenue for it, there can be some better controls put in place to help, just to help manage that a little bit.
As long as we
better.
understand it.
As long as we understand, absolutely. But I think it's worth the discussions for sure.
I'll move forward on getting some clarification with Mike on what we really are allowed to do and see where we go with that. How do we feel about the hours at Black Ridge? I know that one's a sensitive location because of proximity.
Leave it locked.
Leave it locked all the time.
I didn't expect that at all last year.
Well, because we finally reached the sweet spot where we've got things under control, so I'm hesitant to shake anything up on Black Ridge right now, but.
She doesn't want me to open that
I know.
I would add from law enforcement's perspective, some consistency would be nice, because as we go from park to park,
Right.
the officers have a hard time tracking, is this 7 or is it 10 or what? So a little bit of consistency would be, I think, a little bit more.
Give us some
Just take it
suggestions.
to Fort Herman
Yeah.
Park.
Make some.
Pardon?
Just take it to Fort Herman Park.
I would be concerned about the person in there.
Fort Harriman Park? Fort
Me
Harriman
too.
Park.
I know that's.
What's that?
I don't know where Fort Harriman.
Next to his house.
Oh.
I'll say it.
Would you like hours at the community garden? They have to irrigate at
Oh,
some
we're happy
point.
when they're irrigated at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I would be concerned about the first bullet point.
Okay.
It concerns me, partner organizations, sponsored entities, it just seems like it opens a big bag of worms.
The point of that, though, if I remember correctly, was we had a whole discussion at the beginning of this year about baseball and some of the other sports teams and charging for them fees to use the fields. And I think this is possibly an attempt to maybe address that specifically, with not necessarily charging them exorbitant fees to use the facilities.
Yeah, and we're gonna go into that a little
And
bit.
for that reason, I won't have the discussion.
Yeah.
On 3.8, we have it, right?
What's next? Do you wanna go into that? Okay, so next time I'll bring back Wendy's Street ordinance and then you can tell me what you want.
Before you go on, I don't have any desire to see beer gardens or alcohol at our events. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I don't wanna, mix that in our events at this point, so.
I'm fine with having a discussion.
Discussion, that's what I'm open to.
Alright, next segue into sports organizations and leagues. So this indicates how many hours annually our organizations have used in the past. We haven't received requests for next year yet, and we won't until January. But these are the leagues that we typically work with. Our concern, which I think many of you are aware of, is we now have Mountain Ridge High School, which was announced today. They will also have
What's the mascot?
the Sentinels.
Sentinels.
We were really pushing Yeti, but it didn't work out. Sentinels. So this is quite concerning for us because they will all come with their own leagues also. Harriman Baseball has worked out a workaround, I believe, and I haven't talked to James since they had their meeting, but they are going to keep the high schools together, was my last conversation with him. So the kids that feed into either high school would remain under the umbrella of Harriman Baseball. Harriman Football would currently break off if Ute Conference decides to do a football team next year. So we're going to be really short on athletic fields. Soccer has been great to work with. They kind of do their own thing. We give them the space at Copper Creek.
They're easy going, the other sports.
I know. 9 maintenance. The other ones are just
'2500. Some of their coaches are really difficult.
Copper Mountain is at Tuscany and Copper Creek, and Rosecrest and Umbria. so they use quite a bit of lawn space. But they're just happy to get whatever they get. They don't typically give us too much grief. Harriman Rugby, we're starting to see a lot more requests for rugby, and in fact, last week through Utah Warriors, we're contacted about hosting the girls' national rugby tournament. So we're trying to work with them on bringing that to Harriman. Oker Mountain Softball uses Tuscany. We don't nearly have enough softball fields. In fact, we only have 2, so there you go. And baseball uses that at times. Now we have lacrosse, which is a sanctioned school sport. They also need space. And girls lacrosse has started occupying space this year. And now we have the Utah Warriors asking for space, which Gordon and I can touch on a little bit. Providence Hall asks us for space every year, but we just simply don't have anywhere for them to go. And now we have the new high school. So that's where we're at.
Shouldn't the school district be paying for some
that's my
space
question.
for the school teams to play on? I'm not connecting those dots.
So rugby is a team club sport. It's not a school sanctioned sport, so they don't support them. Lacrosse, their first year is this year.
Same scenario though, the school doesn't.
They were club before, so the school would not have paid for them. And I don't know, because we don't do the football team or the baseball team or the basketball team for the high school, I don't know that they would pay for space for them
Also, a little bit
outside of their school.
Providence, you know, they didn't acquire enough property to run clubs for their sports programs. But now they
They'll step up,
started
charter
baseball,
schools.
and now they want to use some space we have, which is already well used. And it's been a struggle for me every year trying to get them sometimes somewhere.
I think that's the difficult part with this, where I kind of cringe being involved in this stuff as a youth coach. I kind of cringe at the idea because we're fighting for space all the time, and this would be the city picking winners and losers.
That's exactly right.
So how do you pick one organization over another? That's why going back to our previous discussion of look, it costs the city money for this use.
No,
We figure out kind of the base cost. I mean, that's what we do to practice. Make sure we've got a place in Draper. We pay them between 4 teams. We pay them $2,000 to rent one park from July through October, 2 nights a week for 2 hours. It turned out to be like $15 an hour, but using it that much. But I mean, there's serious wear and tear on those fields, and we got to do a lot. I mean, our parks people will say so. So I'm a little confused because our previous discussion about this was about that topic. Should we be charging a fee to do that?
And I think last year when we discussed that, we said, prepare your people that they will be paying a fee next year. Part of the issue I have with it is these are public parks, right? And so if they reserve that, it loses the function of being a public park, right?
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. I mean,
Yeah.
we have several run-ins with my team, the park that we rented, and I had the paperwork and said, I'm sorry, we've rented it for this amount of time. Well, they've got the neighborhoods there for, a neighborhood activity, but we had rented the space. We've taken that from the public, from the community. It's their park. So if we're gonna do that, we ought to pay for it.
Pay for it, because
What do you think?
otherwise you're asking the public to subsidize all these activities you're picking winners and losers, because there's other sports and other activities that aren't listed on there. So does everyone
Having said that, I'm
get
not
to use it for free?
going back to the fee schedule we were looking at. I don't think we were entertaining the high end of the fee. We wanted to pay everything. We're saying, no, there needs to be a nominal fee that says, yeah, we're paying for what we're getting, and we're trying to offset some of the maintenance costs, et cetera. We weren't talking about exorbitant things that they were afraid of.
Some stuff we hear from the residents that are involved in these sports programs. You have your super leagues, which some of us are part of that from the youth program groups. They pull from a broader area. Sometimes they'll come, I know it's on the baseball, sometimes they'll come from Battle on the super leagues or all over to form a super league team. For baseball, football, it's every sport. What me and Wendy kind of thought about the methodology, and this is something for you to think about, that's why I want to talk about it now just for a moment, is we look at what's providing the service for sports and recreation for our Harriman kids, our Harriman residents. maybe methodology would be they get first programming on the fields, because if you put it on the leagues, they'll outprice, they'll outbid everybody, and they'll get the fields, and your locals will not get it. And that's our worry. We've seen it overrun baseball fans, they've overrun, Super Leagues overrun everybody when it comes to outbidding, outpricing for paying more for the fields, and they will. They'll pay big dollars
But
for each.
at the same time, I understand your point, but you can just say these groups, I know every single one of those, when they play their games, they're playing games and the teams are coming from other areas. For that, and we're taking up space from other groups that aren't as big as they are. So same thing, we're still picking winners and losers.
Yeah, and that's what we thought that we could actually, methodology-wise, we could think about, or plan going forward, we could actually charge the non-resident kid a little bit more than resident kids, because your resident kids and those parents pay tax dollars, and they pay a park maintenance fee to already use those parks. Just something for you to think about. We got a lot to work, because there'll be that feel, I already pay and I have to pay again.
But
don't
they
wanna get
pay
that
for a
position.
general public use, they
Right.
don't pay for
Not
exclusive
their-
rights. If you want
exactly,
the
yeah.
exclusive right to use the field, just your reservation of it, if I wanted to come and have a big party on it, I have to pay a fee.
And there's higher maintenance on athletic field and all
Exactly.
that, in every sport.
Yeah, that's my issue, and it's not because I don't like any of those sports. My kids were involved in them too, right? But it's just not picking winners and losers and finding the proper way, because people have to realize this is a huge chunk of our budget that goes to parks, huge chunk. And so we have to be careful not to be subsidizing some groups, not subsidizing other groups. It's just, doesn't seem right.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've
And
had
Winnie knows this all too well, we have neighboring cities are willing to put in parks, and we're getting their kids coming and playing on our grass that our residents pay for. So that's the balancing act we need to do.
But
Yeah.
part of that is these groups are bringing them here to play, right? I mean, it's not like they're just Harriman people and it's our neighborhood kids playing against each other. That's not what any of these organizations are. They might be based here, but it's not just Harriman people using
They're
it.
drawing from well outside the city. for
Yeah.
I
these
mean, in
teams.
our economic plan, we want them to draw those people in, but I think what Sherry and I at least are saying is that we don't want to necessarily say these groups are better than any others that want to use those, especially, I mean, my son and I do it all the time, gather up neighborhood kids, just go down to the park, but football's there, we can't use it.
Yeah.
Well,
Now-
I mean, people get ticked all the time, well, football's always there, lacrosse is always there, soccer's always there. Like in my example, at least we paid the $15 an hour to do it. Right? I mean, it's not much, it's a nominal fee, but it at least compensated the city for extra wear and tear on it, and that brief confrontation we had was, you rented it, okay, I get that, because people do that to rent the pavilion.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not like it's rented 24/7 or anything like that.
So I will say, Harriman Baseball, Harriman Football, several of these organizations do a lot of volunteer work for us. And so maybe that's a contributing factor or qualifying factor, right, to get a better rate than another.
Sure.
So just something to think about there.
Yeah.
They are doing a lot
They
for
were
the
saying
city.
something about they put in some lights and things like that to offset, sometimes people work for the rent money or something like that, right?
Yeah.
They're buying some of their own registration fees, they're paying for the top dressing, and they're paying some reseating.
Yeah.
So that's something that they should have to figure out.
So it kind of goes to your super league. Some the haves, right, are going to push out the haves nots.
Yeah.
Like we gotta be
That's the
careful
balancing
about
act that we gotta present to you.
Okay, so now we have 3 more fields coming online in 2019, just to give you an update. Prairie Oaks, we'll be finishing a restroom there in the spring.
It's pretty small, right?
It's pretty small, so it would only be for little soccer people.
Yeah.
Practice, no games, just practice.
Very
Arches is the same
Little
philosophy.
soccer.
Little soccer people or little teen people, practice only. And then we have Field 6 at RSL, which is a completely different animal because we are actually paying RSL to maintain that to their standard. So, I would like to require anyone who steps foot on that field to pay the full rate. Just because we're paying full rate to maintain it. So.
Covering some costs, for sure.
Alright, so options continue to waive fees. It doesn't sound like that's the direction we want to go. We want to establish some sort of fee structure. These are some options that some other cities do. They charge a flat fee per participant. Brett kind of talked about that a little bit, doing a resident, non-resident rate, depending on, we would just have to collect their rosters and then charge the league that fee at the end of the season. We could also charge a reduced rate for identified partner organizations, which we kind of talked about. It could be based on volunteer hours, assistance with maintenance, etc. Any preference in which direction we go on this?
I'd rather do just like a flat hourly rate, and you can still do a tier, resident, non-resident, and it's, I mean, as far as the organizations go, is the organization based in here? It doesn't matter where the kids are coming from, but if the organization is based here, then maybe they get a little bit different rate. I don't like the idea of doing it per participant.
Any other feedback on that?
I agree.
But I'm good with discounts for volunteer hours and stuff like that, whatever you want that way.
They do keep track of it, because
Yeah.
they know this is a hot item that the kids wanna discuss, so.
Yeah, and that's good, and I would certainly respect that.
Thank you.
All right, we have 11 minutes. You don't have enough, do any of your items can we discuss, or?
We're all longer than that.
Gordon, what about,
Blake, I'm looking at
I was
those.
gonna say,
Yeah,
one more done?
one of them in 10 minutes.
I don't think any of them are gonna be done.
I mean, we can go through the slides, but I don't think we'll get
Right, you
any.
can do all of yours.
what about 3.12, Tammy, can you do yours in 10 minutes?
I can do mine.
Okay, let's go to 3.12, Thomas Butterfield Scholarship Discussion.
So I just want to talk about two things quickly in regards to the Thomas Butterfield Scholarship. So as you're aware, we're adding another high school into Harriman. That makes 3 high schools that pull from students, not just in Harriman, but in the surrounding areas. So our scholarship states that they must be a Harriman resident, that the community service has to be done in Harriman. And so I just want to see if you want to stick to those standards, or if you want to open it up outside, but then they have to do the community service in Harriman. Just
And the
wanna
community
see-
service can't be, it has to be solely for that scholarship.
has to
They
be
can't
for that
They
scholarship.
can't double dip.
Right,
community service.
and it has to be done in Harriman.
I'm keeping it the way it is.
I highlighted that, I personally would not like it to be for residents outside of Harriman, regardless of what schools they go to. I think that they need to live in Harriman as a Harriman scholarship.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, last item, we have been approached by, a couple of businesses who are interested in maybe contributing to that amount. So that the amount that's offered increases. And I just want to know if that's something that council would consider entertaining.
They want to have their name attached to the scholarship, or is it?
I'm sure we'd have to reference them as a sponsor of the scholarship.
It's still a good thing.
But, I mean, they're
I'm in
smaller
favor.
businesses, so it's not a ton of money, but it's something. They want to give back to the community, and they thought that this would be a way that
There's
they
no
might be.
strings attached.
And
I'm in
those are
favor.
Harriman businesses.
Yep, local
Yeah, I
business.
think that that's
I'm in
great.
favor.
I am too, because again, it promotes the city and its businesses, so that's
Yep.
great.
So yes, on local business, keep all the requirements the same on the scholarship. Okay.
Tell the school district to make the school 100 feet.
And these are SEMA
Then
things.
we'll have to fire up.
What about Wendy's, veteran military committee?
That's your city manager update.
Yeah,
You're gonna do that right now?
we could do that one piece.
Okay.
Just want to stick around, I don't know.
Take
Anything you wanna break before going in there?
a motion, we adjourn our work meeting.
Second.
Restrooms.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm leaving.